Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing to you the worst books that I read in 2022. We're gonna talk about the 7 books that absolutely ruined my mood. Just not great books, horrible reading experience. Also, 7 is just a cursed number because it's sort of odd. I know that's some people's lucky number, but for me, unlucky. Just bad books. So let's just get into the list. Coming in at number 7 is a book that you could argue is well written, and I am one of the very few people that did not like this book. Like, everyone else loved it. It was on a lot of people's favorites of last year, and I'm sure a lot of people loved it this year too. Like, people are ranting and raving about this book, and unfortunately I'm ranting and raving for negative reasons. The Push by Ashley Audrain. I know, besties, I know, like, the last time I spoke about this on my channel, I had so many people in my comments being like, what? I loved that book, and they were like telling me all the reasons that they loved it. I'm glad that you guys liked it. It wasn't for Sarah. It wasn't for me. But essentially this book is about a woman who gets married and she doesn't really want to have children. She's just like really obsessed with her husband. You know those girls that like don't have any friends and they're just really into their husbands? She's one of those people. And so basically her husband decides midway through their marriage that he's like, I really want a baby. And she's like, I want to make him happy, so I guess I'll do that for him. So she has a baby, because of course that's always a good reason for a woman to be pressured into having a baby. And the minute that this little girl is born, our main character's like, there's something wrong with her. I do not like her. She is the spawn of Satan. I don't feel right about her. But every time she tries to talk to her husband about it, he just acts like she's being a bad mother, makes her feel a little bit crazy, gaslights her a little bit. Eventually she does have a son that she connects to a lot more, and so a lot of the book is about the problem that she has with her daughter, and it ends up causing issues in her marriage. And so the book is actually written as a letter to her husband telling him what happened, because it's very evident at the beginning of the book that they are no longer together. And so you kind of are left wondering, is the daughter actually bad or is the main character crazy? And a lot of this book is actually about generational trauma. It is billed as a thriller very often, but I actually would say it's more of like psychological family drama. I know I made it sound good, and I thought it sounded good going in. And listen, if you go to anyone else's channel, they'll probably say they love this book. I'm telling you, everyone I know that I love and respect is obsessed with this book, and I am just on the outs. Like, I don't know what it was about this book, but I was not loving it. When everyone spoke about it, they made it seem like there was gonna be all these like twists and turns, and we were just gonna be on the edge of our seat wondering if this little girl was evil. But for me, I just felt like everything was very predictable, and I just didn't care. I didn't care. I do think that Ashley Audrain is good at writing, so I definitely would read another book from her. Like, I'd give her another shot when she writes another one. But I think for me, this just was not my type of like thriller drama. I don't even know. Like, it just wasn't for me. Also, the husband was the worst. He needs jail time, actual jail time. Like, I know his character was meant to be frustrating because he kind of gaslights the main character the whole time and makes her feel crazy and stuff, but ultimately I was just like, no. Number 6 on this list might not surprise you if you watched my vlog where I read all of Jane Austen's books and then ranked them. This was the one Jane Austen book that I really did not like. Like, pretty much all the rest were pretty good. This one should be burned. Like, Jane Austen, like, you should have left this one in the drafts. No, this book was bad. Mansfield Park. Just truly, Fanny Price is one of the most insipid, terrible characters that I've ever read from. And I understand that Mansfield Park is supposed to be commentary on like social class and different things like that. But listen, when I read a book, I'm not trying to write an English paper. I don't give a fuck what Jane Austen intended with this. Fanny Price is horrible, and she's in love with her cousin. In this book, we've got Fanny Price, and she gets sent to live with her aunt and uncle at a fairly young age, and right away when she gets there, they treat her very less than. She's very other from the rest of the family. Everyone knows that her mother did not do very well for herself. She married a guy that was like a drunkard and an absentee father, and so it's kind of like embarrassing to everyone that Fanny has to go live with them. So they kind of treat her like she's a random poor girl living in their house, even though she's literally family. And the only person that's nice to Fanny as she's growing up is her cousin. I think his name might be Edward, and so she's just sort of in love with him, even though he's literally her blood cousin. And before you get started typing on your comment telling me, well, the times were different, people married their cousins all the time, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I get it, times were different. I'm just telling you that I hated Fanny Price, so therefore I couldn't get over the fact that she liked her cousin. Fast forward when they're a little bit older, I think they're like in their early 20s, this girl comes to visit, and basically Edward has the hots for her. So the majority of the book is Edward trying to get with this girl and him asking Fanny for advice because they're like best friends and cousins, they're family. And so Fanny is like secretly in love with him the whole time, and it's like this whole jealousy thing, and I could not care less to tell you more about the plot. All you need to know is that Fanny Price is the worst. She's literally the worst. I really don't like her. And I know that she's meek and shy because of her upbringing and nobody being nice to her, but I don't care. She's a loser. She honestly is. I don't give a fuck. I really don't like her because Jane Austen has written other shy characters much better. Like Anne from Persuasion is an icon. I love her so much. Like, she is very, you know, withdrawn and to herself, and she doesn't really speak up for herself, but there's something about her that still feels very strong. Fanny, on the other hand, I don't really get her motivations besides being in love with her cousin. Like, truly, she's just obsessed with Edward, and he's kind of a loser too. Like, he's literally, they're both losers and they deserve each other. At the end, when Edward finally decides that he wants to be with her, it's so random. It's like one one paragraph. It's not romantic at all. It doesn't have any of the sort of declarations of love that any of other Jane Austen's books have. It's very much like he can't get with that one girl and then he's like, I guess I like Fanny. I should get with her. Yeah, I should do that. So if you ever want to read Jane Austen's books, just skip this one. Mansfield Park is not it. In my very not so humble opinion, it's the worst. It's literally the worst. The next book that we have is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. This is a British thriller about a woman that is in a coma, and so half the book is her being in the coma and only being able to hear people but not being able to open her eyes. And then the other half is the events leading up to her being in the hospital, so you're sort of like piecing it together in these two timelines. What made this book so awful is that Miss Alice Feeney is addicted to a plot twist. She doesn't know when to stop. It gets to the point where it's not fun anymore. Like the reveals, you can't even predict them, not because they're good, but because they're so far outside the realm of what could actually happen. Like I really need Alice Feeney to endorse reality, because what is she writing? Like I don't mind a kind of crazy thriller. Like I have plenty of favorite thrillers that are a little bit off the wall. She's just like twist, twist, twist. Like you will literally get whiplash. It wasn't even cute or fun by the end because I was just like, for the love of God, stop. At some point, someone did it. Like if we're doing a whodunit, eventually someone had to do it, and you can't just keep twisting topsy-turvy the whole book. Like it's not good writing at that point. I truly think that Alice Feeney needs to go to a 12-step program where she admits that she's addicted to plot twists, because girl, you gotta stop. In spot number 4, we've got Verity by Colleen Hoover. Before I get into talking about this book, I do want to say that this is not a safe place for liking Colleen Hoover. We hate on Coho here. Sarah without an H, it's definitely a hub for not giving Colleen Hoover love, like quite the opposite. So if you are a Coho stan, you might want to close your ears. You might want to block your ears. You might want to fast forward to the next book, because I'm about to talk some shit. I need to know what kind of drugs Colleen Hoover puts in her books, because I am quite at a loss at why all the girlies love Colleen Hoover. Like truly some of the worst writing I've ever come across in my life. Like you guys are gasping for air. She's got a chokehold on all of you and I don't understand it. So in this book we have got Lowen. Something about Coho is she loves a weird ass female lead character name. So our main character is Lowen, and she is a failed author. Her books are not doing well. She's poor. She's about to get evicted from her apartment. She's desperate. She gets approached by this guy named Jeremy, who is the husband of this woman named Verity, who is a very famous and well-to-do author who wrote this like really good like thriller mystery series, and we need to finish the series, but unfortunately Verity recently was in an accident and she is not able to finish. So Jeremy's like, would you come to our secluded upstate New York whatever estate so that you can go into Verity's office and find all of her notes so you can finish this book series and we can all make her coin. And so Lowen's like, yeah, of course, because literally I'm poor and I need to do this. So Girly goes up to this estate, and while she's in the office she finds this manuscript that's unfinished, and it's sort of like an autobiography that Verity was writing. So we find out fairly quickly that Verity has always been very obsessed with her husband, but she never really wanted to be a mother, and so she actually hated her children, and it's actually very suspicious because both of her daughters have died, and so we think maybe Verity killed one of them. And while Lowen is doing all of this, she starts to think that maybe Verity's not actually in a coma, like she's sort of like thinks she's moving, walking around the house, and all along all this she decides to pick up a relationship with Jeremy. And what I hated so much about this book is that it's over 300 pages, but if you took out every sex scene, this book is probably about 80 pages. Like truly, it is just straight erotica all the way through. And the most annoying part of it is that we have to read sex scenes from Verity's manuscript with Jeremy, but then we also have to read sex scenes of Lowen having sex with Jeremy in modern day. And what's so fucked up about it is that Verity's literally upstairs in the guest room. She has like a nurse come in every day to take care of her, and Lowen and Jeremy are just like fucking having a relationship. Like she's upstairs, guys. Also, the nastiest part is that in her manuscript Verity wrote in this part about how every time her and Jeremy would have sex she would bite the headboard, and so Lowen is actually staying in the master bedroom and she's staying in their bed, and so she sees the bite marks on the bed, and so then when her and Jeremy have sex she also bites the frame in the same spot. I couldn't make this shit up. I could not make this shit up. I would like to, for one day, live in Colleen Hoover's brain to see how she comes up with the things she does, because jail, straight to jail. Like, what? I didn't even find this book that suspenseful because it was just so inundated with sex scenes. Like, truly, so much sex. Like, everyone who recommends this book is like, if you don't like Colleen Hoover, you'll probably like this one because this one's actually a thriller. Girl, I read thrillers all the time. They're so much better than this. Like, I feel like this is a thriller for people who only read romance. Like, if you want good thrillers, like, there's plenty that you could read that are not this. And I'm sorry, I just could not get over the fact that Lowen and Jeremy start having sex when Verity's literally supposedly like in a coma, like in the house, and they just like are literally having loud sex all the time. And there's also another child that lives there because they also have like a little boy that like didn't die. But whatever, I don't know, this book is bad. It's bad. For me, I'm not probably gonna ever pick up another Colleen Hoover book. I read this for a vlog where I was like giving authors I hate a second chance, but at this point I view Colleen Hoover as like a war criminal, and I will not be reading her books any longer unless it's for some sort of like reading experiment. Like, not for me. The third book on this list was a very, very strong disappointment for me. I am so sad that I disliked it. It was The Wrong Heart by Jennifer Hartman. Two of Jennifer Hartman's other books were actually two of my favorite romances that I read all year, so I was so disappointed to read this and have this experience. In this book, we have our main character Melody, and her husband dies unexpectedly, and he was a heart donor, and so she reaches out to the guy that ended up with his heart, and so she tries to start a relationship with him through email. And then meanwhile, she's also going to this support group because she tries to unalive herself at the beginning, and while she's in this support group, she meets this guy named Parker, and they start a relationship, and so she's talking to the heart donor guy, and then she's also talking to Parker, and blah blah blah. You know when you read a romance book and you feel like the male love interest doesn't deserve rights? This is one of those books. Like, I would prefer Jeremy from Verity over Parker, and that is saying something. The whole book, Parker is absolutely insufferable and terrible to Melody. Like, I actually don't understand why Melody kept trying to make it work with him. Like, he would say the most vile things to her, like literally yell in her face and say fuck you and insult her, and then she would show up and bring him cupcakes. Like, truly, like, I'm not making that up. Like, she literally would bake him cupcakes every time that he was mean to her, and I just don't understand what she saw in him. There's literally a scene where they have sex for the first time in the rain outside, and then he just leaves after they have sex. Like, he just like fucks her against a shed and he just leaves, and he's just such a horrible person. Like, every time they start to get close, he's like, oh, I hate you, Melody, you're the worst. And you're like, how am I supposed to like this? When I first started the book, I thought he was just curmudgeonly, like I thought it was like Grumpy Sunshine, but this man actually needs to be committed. Like, I do not like him. Like, no rights, straight to jail, do not pass go. Like, this man is a walking red flag. I was shipping Melody with her dead husband over Parker. I was so confused that Jennifer Hartman wrote this because her other two books that I read had a lot of character development in them. Like, all of the characters go to therapy, they try to figure themselves out, but Parker is just like so insufferable. He actually talks about how he's been to therapy many times, but it never works for him. And I'm like, I think that might be a you problem. Like, genuinely, I think you're a toxic person. He's just so negative, so angry all the time, and he has like mommy issues, and he's just like the literal worst, and I do not understand. Also, later we find out that his reason for living is Melody. Like, they're in this support group for people who tried to unalive themselves, and the only reason he wants to live is for Melody, and I find that just really gross and kind of cringy because I just feel like your happiness and self-worth should not be based on another person. And so this romance just really gave me the ick. I was not vibing, I was not liking it. I just was like, Parker needs to go. Like, I need him to be off this planet. I need him to perish. Not a fan. So in our number 2 spot, we have a book that TikTok loves. Book Talk is obsessed with this book, and I do not understand it. And that is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This book is so bad. It's so bad. It's also so long. Why is it the Lord of the Rings of fake dating? Like, why is it so fucking long? In this book, our main character is going to a wedding in Spain, and her ex-boyfriend is going to be there, and so she lies to everyone and says that she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't. And so her coworker volunteers to be her fake boyfriend, but they don't like each other. They sort of have like an office rivalry, and so they go to Spain together. But the thing is, like I said, this book is so fucking long. They don't go to Spain until like page 200. Like, I was deep into the audiobook before we even landed in Spain, and it was just so bad. It was so bad. I feel like at this point I'm not being very articulate about any of these books. I just need you to know that I think they're all bad. The writing in this was not good. Like, if I had to read about that man's eyes one more time, his blue orbs, his icy blue stare, his blue eyes, like, she talked about his blue fucking eyes so many times, I was actually literally gonna sue her for my time. Like, literally take her to small claims court so she could give me money for my time because of her subjecting me to how many times she talked about this man's eyes. Also, all the sex scenes gave me the ick. There was just a lot of like dirty talk, but it felt weird for the characters, and I just felt like they had no chemistry. I feel like they were like two cardboard cutouts like fucking. Like, it was weird. I was not into it. I would say more about this book, but I read it all the way back in January, so I don't really remember all of my thoughts. If you want to see a really in-depth rant about The Spanish Love Deception, you can go back and watch my vlog where I read booktuber's favorite books of last year, and so this was Kevin Kelly's favorite book, and so I'm so sorry to Kevin that I didn't love it. I'm glad that he loves it because that's iconic for him, that this is a book that brings him joy. Unfortunately for me, no. And coming in at number 1 is truly one of the worst romance books that I've ever read in my entire life, and that is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. Like, truly one of the worst books. So in this book we have our main character Kristen, and she's about to be a bridesmaid in her best friend's wedding, and she meets this other groomsman named Josh, and they hit it off and they start a romance, which is weird because Kristen actually has a boyfriend who is in the military that's deployed right now, so there's a little bit of like cheating vibes if you ask me. But basically Kristen and Josh start hanging out and they really like each other, and the issue is that Kristen has infertility problems and she's about to get a hysterectomy because I believe she has like endometriosis, and Josh has said multiple times that he like really wants a big family. He wants to have kids the natural way. The amount of times this man said that he wants to have kids the good old-fashioned way was just too many to count. And so like I said, Kristen has a boyfriend, so I don't really know why she's like flirting with Josh, but everybody in the book seems to think that it's fine because they're not like actually physically doing anything. There's actually a lot of on-page stuff where Kristen is like, I'm not a cheater, but then she will hang out with Josh at all hours of the night and he gives her piggyback rides and like massages her feet and does like a lot of weird stuff that if I had a partner who was doing that with someone else, I would literally break up with them, but whatever. Eventually she does break up with this boyfriend and her and Josh start having sex, and so she tells him that she only wants to be friends with benefits because she doesn't want him to know about her lady issues. And so it's kind of a weird book because people on one hand are like, oh my god, it's so great, it's infertility rep, and you know, she's got bad periods and never talk about periods and romance and blah blah blah. But where this book goes awry is that, I'm gonna give you a spoiler here right now, so if you don't want to hear how this book ends, fast forward. At the end of this book, she has a miracle baby, because the whole time that Josh and Kristen are fucking throughout this book, they are not using protection because she thinks she can't get pregnant, and so obviously she does get pregnant at the end, and it just kind of feels like Abby Jimenez wanted to spit in everyone's face. She's like, just kidding, she gets to have a miracle baby, so fuck you. And there is an author's note at the end where she says that this book is based on her best friend's story, and I find that very happy that her best friend was able to have a baby, but I don't know, maybe don't like build this as rep for women who struggle with infertility and then have them read it and then get like traumatized by what they're reading. I don't know. There's also just a lot of like weird anti-women stuff in this. Like in Josh's perspective, whenever he's thinking about Kristen, he always compares her to other women and like puts them down. Like he constantly refers to Kristen as the cool girl. She's so much better than other women. Like there's this one day where he goes on a date with like a yoga instructor, and then he hangs out with Kristen later that night and he's like, oh my god, Kristen's so much cooler and better than her. And then he actually refers to women as like crazy bitches, and how he loves that Kristen isn't crazy because she loves to drink beer and go hunting and have barbecues. And there was also just like some really weird conservative vibes because Josh was also like very obsessed with getting his gun. Like he always says, I need to go get my gun whenever they were in a scenario that he perceived as being not safe. And there was a lot of like pro-military stuff in it. I don't know, like all the male characters had previously been in the military, and I'm not saying that automatically makes you conservative, but I just felt like Josh was, because the way he was talking about other women and stuff. And then Kristen herself also puts down other women a lot, even thinking to herself that she is kind of like a cool girl. And I just really want to know when authors are going to understand that we don't really want to read about the cool girl. Like that's not really what we're into. Also, there's this random part in the book that drove me absolutely insane where Kristen struggles with bloating because of her issues, and so when they're about to have sex, she warns him that her stomach might be bloated, which is fine, whatever, we're all insecure about our bodies sometimes. But later she's telling her best friend the story of what happened, and she basically says something along the lines of, before he fucked me, I had to tell him about my bloating issues because I didn't want him to think that he was like fucking a pregnant woman. Like that's literally basically along the lines of what she said in that quote, and I was shocked. I was like, Abigail, why would you write that? Literally, like, get real. Like, why would you write that? That's crazy behavior. And then there's this other part where the ex-boyfriend, like the guy that was deployed that she was dating at the beginning of the book, comes to town so he can like talk to her, and they go out to eat to like kind of connect about why they broke up and whatever. And she tells him that she used to think he was gay because he dresses well and likes to go to the theater. So like weird homophobic gender role vibes as well. I don't know, this book was bad. If you want to hear my really raw, in-depth rant about this, I recommend going to watch the vlog where I talked about this book. I believe it was my first blind date with a book vlog. So if you want to just really hear my thoughts, that is a good place to go. But other than that, all you need to know is that this book was bad. It was really bad, and I didn't like the writing, and I was sick of the cool girl trope, and that Josh kept referring to her as a unicorn, literally used the word unicorn so many times, and it gave me the ick. It was bad, and I felt like it was bad for women who wanted to read about infertility. Like, what the fuck? But that brings us to the end of this video. Let me know what your least favorite books were of 2022. We can chat about it. Did you like these books? Did you dislike them? Feel free to use the black heart emoji in your comment if you made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it. And let's just chat in the comments about everything. Thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.